Hey everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a small little card game that was kickstarted, I believe, by Tasty Minstrel Games a while back. And that game is Harbour, which is designed by Scott Alms. Now this game is a worker placement game where you only have one worker, and you're placing on two buildings in order to take actions. You're going to be placing onto those buildings in order to take actions, in order to get goods, in order to sell them for money, in order to buy buildings and get victory points, and that's basically the game. So real quick, now that I've given you the very quick outline, why don't we go ahead and take a look at what comes inside of this box. We'll see exactly how the game plays, and then we'll come back at the end and get my opinions on Harbour. So here you can see the components for a two-player game of Harbour all set up. There is some minor changing for a three-player game of Harbour. This little board flips over. Some more cards would be available to place on as buildings, but that's going to be the major differences. Now, each player in this game is represented by some type of person. In this case, we have an alchemist, and we have an efficiency expert, but there are tons and tons of these different characters that you can use, each of which has a different ability throughout the game. So it could be ignore further anchors you acquire. This guy has 2 anchors on his starting thing. You would ignore any other anchors. Or it could be whenever you gain livestock, you may adjust the price of livestock up or down by 1 on the market board. So this person controls livestock. The 2 players we have are going to be the alchemist, who says that any time on your turn, once per turn, you may spend a good to convert any 2 goods of one type to another single good type. So you can convert 2 goods to a different type by spending a good. Our other player here has his special ability that just says whenever he uses his starting building printed on his card, which is usually an either-or option, he can do both. So, our players are set up. They have 3 starting goods, which they got to select. And they have their little pawn. Now also what you're looking at here is some buildings that are set out. We have these buildings right here. There are 5 of them because it's always equal to 3 plus the number of players. So we have 2 players, 5 buildings. And these buildings are available for anybody to use and are also available to be bought. We'll talk about what each of them does here in just a moment. And as people buy buildings, more buildings will come into play. Each player also has a building on their starting character. You also have a market out here, and then you have some extra goods tokens that would be for the other players in the game, and some extra tokens that would be for the other players if we were playing a 3 or 4 player game. The market has some randomly distributed goods on it. You can see wood, fish, livestock, and stone. And currently they have prices 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is the dollar value you get for selling them. However, you must have 2, 3, 4, or 5 of them in order to sell them. So you have to have at least 5 stone to sell the stone, and that would be worth $5. You must only have 4 livestock to sell livestock, and that would be worth $4. 3 fish, $3, and 2 wood, $2. So you're going to be trying to control the values of these goods in order to sell them at the appropriate time to get money to buy buildings. On your turn, you are going to place your pawn onto any vacant building. So you have a pawn, you will place him on any vacant building. That could be the building on your own board. If I were to place on my own starting building, I would get to go up 1 stone and any 1 other good. So I would be able to take a stone and any 1 other good, perhaps a livestock, or maybe I want to take my wood. Now, instead, I could build a building, but I don't have nearly enough money to do that because I would have to sell goods in order to generate money to buy a building. The other places you can place are on your opponent's building, so I could place on my opponent's empty building on their card, or I can place on any of the buildings out here. These buildings will be different as the game goes on, or in different games, because different cards will be randomly dealt out. But for example, we have the ghost ship here. I'm going to try and hold it as still as possible. But the ghost ship says that you can place onto here and move on to another building that's occupied currently. So somewhere that somebody is already at, where you wouldn't usually be able to play. This building then gets shuffled back into the deck and a new building will come out. So this basically lets you play somewhere where someone has already played, breaking the rules. If you were to place onto this building, you are going to get 1 wood for every anchor that you have. So this building is called the Lumberyard, and you'll see that there are anchors printed on some of these cards here, the player boards, and there are anchors printed on some of the buildings that you can purchase throughout the game. For example, this one right here, the clock tower. The next building is going to say that you may decrease your livestock total in order to get a fish, a stone, and a lumber. So that one's pretty good. If I were to place there, I would be able to decrease my livestock and gain 1 of everything else instead, just like that from my starting position. Placing on this one would give me stone for anchors, and the final one says that I can spend a good of any type, and on my next turn, move my guy to a building and do its action twice. So that's pretty good. It doubles the action of a building. Particularly good if you happen to have 2 livestock and would like 6 goods. So that's what all of the buildings out here do, and as I said, there are many, many more buildings available in this deck. But on your turn, you're simply going to move your pawn to any vacant building. For example, let's say we move there, and take my action. At the end of my turn, I'm going to pass to the next player, and they're going to do the same thing. Place their pawn on a building and take their action. So maybe this player decides that they would like to go ahead and get a lumber for every anchor they have, which is a grand total of 1 lumber. And then it would go back to the first player. Now, you're going to do this until you have the option to sell goods, right? You're trying to build a building. There are several cards out here. Right now, the only 2 that are available on our starting player boards that have the option to build a building. That's what this little building icon is, and there will be more cards out here that allow you to build buildings throughout the game. But building a building is going to let you take any one of these central buildings and place it into your own player area. Now, this is a benefit because it's still available for you to use for free, but it also is available for your opponent to use. And if they place on that empty building, they have to pay you a good in order to use it. So you want to buy them in order to get them into your tableau, not only because they're worth victory points, not only because it's an endgame condition, but because they're good for you and they're bad for your opponent if they want to continue using them. Additionally, they have symbols on them right here. So you'll see this one has a top hat. This top hat means you can use your opponent's buildings for free. Or this one right here has a warehouse on it, which means that when you sell goods, you actually get to keep one of the goods. Or these 2 buildings have coins on them. That means when you buy a building, it costs you a coin less for each coin you have on your buildings. And finally, we've already seen the anchors, which can be used to gain more resources from different cards. So, when you buy a building, you need to have enough goods to sell in order to generate the money needed in order to pay the cost of the building. For example, this building here, the clock tower, costs $12. How do you generate money? Well, as I said, you have to have acquired goods. So let's just, for the sake of fun here, say that I have acquired 5 and 4 and 2, right? So I have 5 stone, I have 4 fish, and I have 2 lumber. All right, and I decide that I want to get a building that is worth, let's call it 8. I decide I want to buy the quarry. So let's say that for my action, I have taken my pawn and I move on to my own guy, and I decide to take the buy action. I am buying a building. To do this, I am going to sell all 5 of my stone, and I have to sell all of them regardless, so I'm going to lose all of my stone, and I'm going to slide stone down. I'm going to sell all of my fish. Now you'll note that I have 4 fish, and fish is only worth 3. Doesn't matter that I have 4, I'm only going to get $3 for them, and I'm going to lose all of my fish. So now I've got $8. 5 and 3 is 8, and I am going to take the quarry. So the quarry is going to move over into my own area, and it's hard to see there, so we'll place it here. I have 1 building, I've spent $8, and I have 6 victory points and the ability to get stone for anchors. Also, future purchases will cost me $1 less. Now we're going to go ahead and restructure the market. So everything will slide over, and these things that I sold will slide back around and become devalued. Well, the fish is actually worth the same, but stone is now worth far less than it was before. But you need fewer of them in order to sell. Additionally, we're going to replace the card that was out here. Now we have a card that lets us pay a fish in order to get a livestock, a stone, and a lumber. And that's basically going to be how the game is going to play out. Now this card is available for this player to use for free. They have extra icons, and the other player can choose to use it, but pay a good in order to do so, giving a good to this player. You're going to continue on in this manner until somebody builds their 4th building. When somebody builds their 4th building, that's essentially going to be a trigger for the end of the game. And at the end of the game, you're going to get points for 2 things, really. The buildings you've built, so all of the victory points printed on the buildings, up to 12 in this case, on as low as 6 for the ones that we've already seen. And you're going to get any points that would happen to trigger from your special ability on your character card. So if you have a character card that gives you bonus points, you could get points from that. Additionally, there is an option to use these cards at the start of the game and deal them out. One is a fish bonus, one's a wood bonus, one's a stone bonus, and one is a livestock bonus. And at the end of the game, for leftover resources you have, you can convert them into points. So each player could have a specific resource that they're trying to accumulate. But basically, throughout the game, you're going to try and build buildings as fast as possible by getting resources using the best buildings, convert those resources into money, and then use that money to buy buildings that other players might want to use and give you more resources. And whoever best does this in the game of Harbour will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Harbour from Tasty Minstrel Games. A very simple take on worker placement in the vein of the style, I should say, the style of Le Havre. So I'm pretty sure, and the theme makes sense, that this game is pretty heavily influenced by Le Havre, which is a design from Uwe Rosenberg. So, with that said, I don't want to unfairly compare it to Le Havre, but I'm probably going to anyway. The concept of placing a single worker onto a building and taking an action is very Le Havre, and that's fine. And this tries to streamline it and make it much easier to play, and it certainly is. It's definitely much easier to play. However, I do have some criticisms of the game. So one, the buildings are good. I like the different buildings. I like the different abilities on the buildings, but sometimes you get a draw of buildings and they're just not great, right? There's nothing really exciting about them. I don't feel excited when I'm looking at them, and I don't really want to take any of the actions. So a lot of the times I'm moving back and forth between my base building to get a resource or 2 resources, and then back to a good building that will let me convert 1 resource into 3 resources, and that's pretty much how my games go. Now, that won't necessarily be true if those buildings aren't available or some better combination of things is out there, but I haven't seen a ton of amazing combinations that really make me think, boom, this is a great idea, and there's a lot of interaction going on. 2, the player abilities are kind of cool. I like that each player has abilities, and there's a ton of them. I mean, a ton of player abilities that come in this. So dependent on what character you have a different way of generating resources, or a different way you can interact with buildings, or a different way you can interact with other players. Lots of different choices. However, I'm not sure they're all really balanced. I've seen a couple that I just don't think work as well as others. So most of them give you 2 resources, one of one specific type, one of another type. A couple of them only give you 1 resource, and one of them gives you 1 resource and or the ability to build a building. But I haven't seen that be a huge benefit of gaining 1 resource and building a building in the same turn. That really helps you over getting 2 resources and just building later. So there's that. The game does offer a single player. I haven't played it. It may be great. I don't really play single player games, so I can't speak to that. But all in all, it just doesn't feel exciting to me, and I apologize if the game is beloved by many of you, but it's not exciting to me. I think if I were going to play a game that's in this vein, even though it takes much longer, I'd probably play 3-player Le Havre. And that's really all I have to say about that. So if you're looking for a really light version of Le Havre, you love Le Havre and you want to be able to play it, you know, in 20-40 minutes on the road in a small format, this might be the game for you, but I don't think it's the game for me.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.